Hello and welcome to Burnout, the weekly drag racing show. I'm your host, Wes Buck, and we are so excited to have you along for the ride this week. As always, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Mike GALIMI and Alex Taylor. How you guys doing? Mike, you hanging in there in New York?
Yeah, doing great. Had a little unusual situation over the weekend. I actually got to follow race results and keep up with what's going on in drag racing. It's kind of awkward. I was a little rusty, but got back in the groove.
So true. Alex, you hanging in there?
I'm hanging. It's been a busy weekend. I bought a truck on Friday and then finished Bad Marrow up pretty much this weekend. So it's been a good weekend.
Was that like your first vehicle? Didn't you just turn 16?
No, it's my second.
No, you're way younger than Mike and I. No, it's all right. It's all right. Well, hey guys, pull those belts tight and get ready for week 10 of Burnout. As always, we're covering a whole lot of bases here on Burnout, especially in this week's three big things. Mike's going to talk a little bit about ProChargers and how those cars have performed here early in 2020, while Alex chimes in on her thoughts on the big news regarding Summit Motorsports Park that announced that they would be closing for the remainder of the 2020 season just yesterday. And I'm going to touch a little bit on the Professional Racers Organization and how that organization could perhaps be a little more visible or a little less visible to increase their power and influence here in the drag racing world. Mike, let's get this thing started.
Yeah, so, right out of the gate, PDRA kicked off this past weekend, and, you kind of start looking at Pro Boost, and, the ProCharger once again is taking center stage, running super fast. John Strickland, the Galot Motorsports guys, my notes, I think 360s consistently, 65, 67, goes right in the finals and loses, but had the faster car, and then you rewind a little bit, COVID-8, Brian Markowitz, 357, right in the thick of it, just with all of the other combinations. And then you go back to your World Door Slammers and the NMCA race, both great for ProCharger. Eric Gustafson and Jason Lee and those guys won the NMCA race with a ProCharger car. And, Justin Bond over at yours really lit it up, running 560s, 564. So
564.
I mean, right out of the gate, it's, four very different rule sets, and the ProChargers, right in the thick of it with other combinations with some really good teams. I know NHRA, they felt like it's, some guys feel it's a little bit quicker, but across the other, Radio vs. the World, Outlaw Pro Mod and PDRA Pro Boost, it's right in the middle of everything.
I think I've not been, to be honest, it feels like no one believed in it, which surprised me. It felt like it took a minute for more and more people to adopt that program. But now that they have, oh my goodness, I think you hit the nail on the head with that run from Justin Bond at the World Door Slammer Nationals in Orlando, 564, basically off the trailer. For essentially their first competitive run of 2020. And I honestly think that was kind of we talked to Ricky Smith about it here on Burnout earlier this year, Stevie Jackson earlier this year. That run was a seismic happening in drag racing because it was, most of these guys are a little bit better poker players than that. They will, they'll wait a while to show their hand. And I think that here early in the season, I admit that we are headed into hot weather, but I think it's going to be it's so hard to talk about this stuff because we typically have these seasonal landmarks like Bristol in June and Norwalk in June and all these events that we kind of use as rulers or barometers for the year. Without those, it's tough to tell. But I thought we would see the ProChargers burst onto the scene and have, if not an advantage, be on par with all the other combinations here early in the year. But I thought we might see that fade in the summer. However, we've heard here on Burnout and elsewhere that those cars aren't as affected by the weather as maybe they were believed to be. So it's still up in the air where this combination's, power or performance potential caps out. But I think you're right, man. They've made waves. They have certainly burst onto the scene. And if I'm the guys at ProCharger, Eric Radson, Ken, all those guys in Kansas, I would be walking around with my chest puffed out right now, because they have put the drag racing world on notice.
I mean, it's definitely been the whole throughout the season or our season of Burnout. ProChargers have been brought up multiple times into the new entries into the new classes and that, and it's definitely, you can tell from the different people we've talked to, it has ruffled some feathers because it's, you know, they're seeing results and there's been some feathers ruffled. We've heard some.
The thing that I'm excited about for racers specifically, and there's a couple of things. One is, from what I understand, and I don't want to give away, like, make it all about business, but this is a scalable thing where these things are repeatable by and large. They're very consistent performers. The way that they make power is very linear. So it's, whereas like a twin turbo combination, especially when I look at like Pro Modified, Outlaw Pro Mod, Radial versus the World, you know, those things make more power the more they're loaded. You know, so you bog the motor down or whatever, it's just going to make a bad problem worse. Whereas the ProCharger program, for the most part, looks like something that a guy can get a hold of and be competitive right off the bat. You don't have to have necessarily a rocket scientist tuner on hire that you're paying a couple $1,000s a day just for his presence. I think it's something that allows some of these engine building businesses the opportunity to scale because they don't have to send, you know, a crew out to run that combination. I also see it as something that, you know, the RPM levels aren't, you know, the 10,000 plus RPM level that we're seeing with the Roots blowers. So you don't have the same valve train issues that you oftentimes have with those things. So it's, I don't know, it feels like a great move kind of for heads up drag racing to have that crazy performance, but not have to maybe break it every run in order to achieve it.
I think it's people look at it as a new combination. You know, I remember when the company came out, you know, 25, 26, 27.
You're dating yourself, brother. You're dating
I know,
yourself.
but I remember, I mean, they launched on a 5-liter Mustang,
Yeah, you're right.
You know, right out of the gate, you know, 11s. And so I've watched the product grow from, you know, a bolt-on 5-liter Mustang car to what it is today. And it's, you know, and they've done a great job every step of the way. They look at, you know, all right, this is working for us, this is not working for us. And they've developed this product. And, you know, guys like Steve Petty over at Proline, who's worked with this combination extensively. I mean, you know, early 2000s with NMRA, he had customers that were, you know, when they were small tire car guys, you know, they had customers that had ProChargers and Vortec blowers, and he's done the centrifugal thing for so long. And it's a pretty developed combination. And it's good to see it on a big stage because I felt like it came from our side of the world.
You nailed it. Big stage. And I think that is exactly right. I mean, I obviously we could get a lot of racers on here that would maybe argue otherwise, but if you look at NHRA Pro Mod right now, it's like a cornucopia of hot rodding, right? I mean, we've got 903-inch nitrous engines, 960-inch nitrous engines. We've got Pro-charged Hemis, twin turbo Hemis, and of course, Roots blown Hemis. It's cool to see that much variety, and I really think that it contributes to the growth and popularity ongoing of Pro Mod across the board. So I'm glad you brought this up. It was a fun one to talk about, but we can't go much further, unfortunately, without talking about the elephant in the drag racing room right now, and that is the announcement that Bill Bader Jr. made yesterday via social media that Summit Motorsports Park would indeed be closing for the remainder of 2020. They never got their doors open here this season, to the best of my knowledge, or very minimally before the COVID-19 crisis took place. Alex, I know you've got some feelings about this. You were headed there in 2020 on Drag Week. Where do you stand on this deal?
Well, I just didn't think we could. I mean, we started Burnout episode 1 talking about how Corona was affecting everything. Then throughout this, we've seen it kind of, you know, we're starting to get back open. And then episode 10, I felt like it was only appropriate to close it with this. Norwalk they announced they were the first ones. We are opening. I'm not calling anyone out, stepping on anyone's toes, but they were the first ones headstrong going at it, opening up. And that was kind of what I feel like, you know, started the hopes of getting back to drag racing. And then as of yesterday, we see that now they are not going to open, as you mentioned. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out with other tracks. Like, will anyone follow suit? Because from my understanding, and I think as Mike mentioned earlier before the show, you know, financially, you know, it does make sense. So will other tracks follow that? Will they see that it's okay to go ahead and step back now? You know, they were the leader, so hopefully they're not the leader on this as well.
I think, you know, in terms of speaking financially for Bill, you know, I mean, he knows his books better than anybody, whether it be rumors or, you know, people just talking behind the scenes. And, you know, for him to make that decision, I'm sure it wasn't easy. I mean, his family's operated this thing for pretty much his entire adult life. And, you know, it's got to be a really tough choice. But, you know, Bill's always been a leader in terms of in terms of the business side of this. You look at how he operates his business from customer service. Everything about Summit Motorsports Park is very business-like and very calculated. So, Bill, it takes nerve to say, look, it's not going to work. And he knows his business, and I feel bad for him. It sucks.
For me, and I have a couple of points that I'd like to make, and I wanted to make sure that I heard both of you out before I chimed in. For me, there's two big takeaways for this. One is it's a tragedy. I look at Norwalk, that city, the small town in Ohio, Summit Motorsports Park. It's iconic. It's used. I don't even know what an adequate description would be. It's a landmark on virtually every sanctioned series schedule, right? That you're going to Norwalk. It's synonymous with successful drag racing venues. So for Bill Bader Jr. and company to make the decision to close down for the year, I have chills right now in a bad way. I hate it for them. I hate it for their family. I hate it for racing and in general as a whole. Who can you imagine a season of racing without a pound of ice cream for $1? These silly things that they've done such an amazing job of making part of the Norwalk experience. I really can't imagine the sport of drag racing without Norwalk in it. So I hope, as you said, Alex, and that they are prepared and going to be able to open in 2021. The other point that I wanted to make from a business perspective is how significant of an issue is this for our entire sport that Bill was quoted in saying on his Facebook post, I'm pulling information from that they had already lost 83% of their revenue for 2020 here on this second day of June. Right? We're less than halfway through the year and they're out 80% of their business. What that shows me is that we need as an industry to find more ways for these tracks to make money, because it looks to me like knowing that they're not going to have an NHRA national event basically puts their whole season in the tank. That seems problematic for a facility like that to be almost entirely reliant on a single event to make ends meet and to make it make sense. So I'm not trying to issue any sort of challenge or anything, but I think that responsibility kind of falls on the community of, all these promoters, sponsors. It's been said many times before that successful promoters may be the most important thing in drag racing, but even they're screwed if we don't have tracks to go to, right? So what can we do moving forward as a community, as an industry, to make sure that a single event on the calendar doesn't derail a track's entire year? Because we haven't heard from. We're going to be talking to Tommy Franklin this week on Burnout, and he's the owner of Virginia Motorsports Park, and I'm curious, is their season as a whole also a complete and utter loss? Is it just a foregone conclusion that 2020 is a bad year because they're not going to have their national event? I'm speculating here, but I'm going to say the answer is yes.
It's a big amount of money. it's no secret, right? If you're a national event track, it's a significant amount of money. And to attract a national event, you have to have certain requirements as a track, which is very big infrastructure updates and, big cost that goes along with that. Bill's expressed that on his, Facebook Live about how much money they've reinvested back into it rather than just keep taking out of the facility. So you make a point of, the business side of it. It's owning a track is like owning a bar, right? It sounds glamorous, but if you talk to any bar owner, it's not the most glamorous lifestyle around, So I think, I think Bill is a very, calculated and organized and thinks things through. And if he's looking to 2021, I can only imagine what his 2021 schedule is going to be like. It's going to be a bang up, awesome schedule, because now you've got a guy who could start in June and prepare for next year. And I'm looking forward already to going back there with the NMCA series next year, because it's going to be awesome, right?
I got to tell you, for me as a promoter, it inspires me to want to do something at Norwalk. Like I feel challenged in a way. I feel challenged in a way to put an event on that schedule in Ohio that's going to keep that place open, national events or no national events. And obviously that's a pretty hefty ask, and that's kind of a bold proclamation. But I think that our entire community needs to kind of feel that, right? We need to be helping or being involved with this stuff, whether it's think tank work or behind the scenes stuff that has to happen, some sort of track owner operator summits. I'm not sure. I'm just throwing darts here. Something has to happen so that these tracks aren't completely beholden to a handful of dates on the calendar. Because COVID this year, rioting in the streets, there's a whole lot going on, murder bees or whatever here in 2020. But if it's not that, it's a rainstorm, right? It's a tropical depression. It's always something. And I don't know that we understand how serious these things are for track owners. Like you said, it's nowhere near as glamorous as it looks. And that's a bit of a solid segue for us to round out this week's three big things. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Professional Racers Organization. I'm not sure that everyone in the drag racing community even knows that this organization exists. They are largely comprised of Top Fuel, Funny Car, and Pro Stock NHRA-centric team owners and racers that get together. I'm not sure how frequently, but offer their input and advice to the NHRA, try to work with the NHRA on safety issues and scheduling issues and payout structures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just curious, as we talked to Scott Woodruff from JEGS, he's a member of the Professional Racers Organization this week on Burnout, what is our stance on an organization like this? I'm just asking you guys for the sake of conversation. Mike, Alex, does an organization like this need to be more visible? Do they need to have a website? Do they need to have, a couple, 3-4 times a year meetings? Do they need to have town hall-esque meetings? What does drag racing need something like this? And the main reason I bring this up is obviously there's a lot of unanswered questions that exist in our sport right now, but I'm a big fan of a multitude of different things, one of them being mixed martial arts. And the UFC has often been threatened, so to speak, by fighters and their competitors unionizing, right? Forming some sort of union to force change or to press issues. Or, I look at stick and ball sports, the NFL has a players association, the NBA has a players association. I'm sure the MLB and the NHL have player associations. I'm just curious, could drag racing benefit from some sort of player racer association that could, have a little influence and carry a little weight? Because I'm not sure that pro, as quietly as they kind of operate, achieve what I would want to achieve if I was heading something like that up.
I think you have to look at the function of it and what they're trying to achieve, right? If they're trying to force NHRA to make changes on behalf of the competitors, then yeah, they need to be more visible because the court of public opinion is kind of what moves the needle. But if Scott will explain, pro is more than just that. Your new team comes in, how do you get a truck wrapped? How do you, activate a lot of different aspects of a pro team that they're a great resource that these teams can go to. I don't think that side of it needs to be, pushed out to the public, and I think,
agreed.
Yeah, there's elements of it that need to be internal and elements that can be public.
I've got kind of two thoughts, kind of mixed thoughts on this. So I know we've discussed previously how on the show how there needs to be some sort of organization or some form of something to help people move up from a lower level to a higher level. So while pro does have its own, like as Mike was saying, it has its roles, both public and private, there isn't a lot of public. So maybe rather than, criticizing pro, why isn't there that organization, or why would we not want something that is a little bit more visible for, I know we look over the smaller people sometimes because they don't matter as much, but we need those smaller people to move up. So information like
but you're right, Alex.
And
because the smaller people, not to step on you here, but those people matter the most, in my opinion.
There's more.
The sportsman racers, the weekend warriors, the grassroots guys, those are the guys that pay full price for parts. Mm-hmm. They don't get anything for free. They pay overnight shipping charges, right? It's their contribution to the drag racing ecosystem cannot be overstated. And God bless John Forrest, Don, et cetera, but those are the people that we need to cater to by and large.
Right. Yeah.
That's how drag racing is, right? Grassroots is it's the biggest motorsports because of grassroots racing. Mm-hmm. And like you said, they're the ones who buy the parts. They're the ones that all of these companies are moving race parts. The volume comes from those guys. And, the handful of pro teams is not going to keep, some of these piston companies in business. It's the sportsman grassroots stuff.
No.
No, it's very, and I think, we go back to, some of the open challenges that have been, that we've the questions that we've brought up here over the course of 10 episodes of Burnout. And I think the next question that I ask, and we'll say this in closing here on this week's Three Big Things, is that I think it may be time for some sort of racers organization, something that crosses all sanction and series boundaries, something that, as you said, Alex, maybe opens the door for someone such as yourself, who's an aspiring professional racer or someone who aspires to move up through the ranks. There's probably group learning that could happen in some sort of organization where you could pick the brains of successful racers, the Erica Enders, the Alex Laughlins, the Jeg Coughlins, the John Forces, and maybe even your peers that are a step or two ahead of you, right? And there are probably plenty of people that would love to ask you a question and to learn from your experiences. So I think that that's something that is weighing heavily on me personally, that there needs to be some sort of group learning, group problem solving program in the drag racing world sooner rather than later. This feels like a group of people that are dying to be led, right? Dying to be led. And I think the time is now, because there's a whole lot of things that our sport needs, maybe now more so than ever. And a little bit of a dramatic close there, but that wraps up this week's Three Big. For this week's reaction time, we've got a race day replay from the PDRA East Coast Nationals that took place this past weekend at GALIMI Motorsports Park in Benson, North Carolina. I think we're going to take a look at Jim Halsey laying down a number in Pro Nitrous competition. Mike, Alex, you ready?
Stage on. Here we go, man. Here's a rising up. Get on the edge of your seat. Halsey's in. Here comes Rainey on the left-hand side.
Let me just say this. Thank God and the stars above for nitrous door slammers. I'm telling you, there is something, obviously a 366 with a 7 at 205 is something. Big time speed for an 8th mile run out of a nitrous car for sure. But my thing is that, Mike, and I'm curious, obviously you've been following Pro Mod for a long, long time. The NMCA has an incredible Pro Mod program with their Extreme Pro Mod division. How important to you are nitrous cars? Like bullhorns or zoomies and header flames and nitrous purges, hood scoops, the rumble of a 900 plus inch nitrous engine. I mean, to me, drag racing needs these cars bad.
Oh, it always needs diversity, but there's the dramatic look of it, right? They pull the front cap off, the doors off. I mean, it's like a science project under there. It's fun. I mean, it's very, very old school, but still with the EFI so modern, and it's fun to watch. And, just as you think, well, nitrous has been around for, since the 70s in drag racing, and it's still, it's still developing. So it's good to see it's still there and still very, very competitive.
205.82, I believe, miles per hour in the 8th mile. Alex, can you imagine a ride like that?
200 even and a quarter. Scale that back to an 8th. That would be an amazing ride.
Oh my goodness. 205 miles an hour to the 8th mile. People don't realize, I think sometimes, that's 660 feet. That's 2 city blocks. 0 to 205.
They don't.
2 city blocks.
I try to put that into perspective for people, and they just don't. Like when I'm trying to explain, acceleration and, with people that are not familiar with it, I'm like, no, it's this distance to this distance and this time, and it's not understood.
You look at 366 and you look at like a supercar, I think, they're down in the low 4 range going 0 to 60, and he's going 0 to 205, almost in more than triple. Yeah. More than triple of what a supercar would do, and to do it in this time of the year, right? I mean, it's not like we're in the dead of fall and it's at nighttime.
No,
it's
massively humid this past weekend in North Carolina. Definitely not the conditions that you would typically see for record-setting runs such as this. The fastest 8th mile nitrous pass, one of the fastest nitrous passes of all time in the 8th mile, 205.82, and it's the cool thing about the PDRA's Pro Nitrous division, and we'll be talking with Tommy Franklin here this week on Burnout, who is a 2-time champion in the PDRA Pro Nitrous category. The coolest part about it is you've got a Charlie Buck built engine in the left-hand lane, very competitive, driven by Chris Reaney, who we've also had on the show in the past weeks. The other lane, you've got a Gene Fulton built engine. It's cool to see all these different people and players that are involved in nitrous racing. And it wasn't that long ago, I would say in the middle 2000s, 2005, 6, 7, that I think a lot of racers and fans thought the nitrous combination was on the way out. This feels good as dead, cannot compete with the turbos and the blowers. And here they are running mid 360s in the 8th mile at 2,450 pounds at over 205. It's truly unbelievable. And that'll wrap up this week's Reaction Time.
Scott Woodruff, who is the director of media and motorsports over at JAGS, but ironically, we are not going to talk to him about that. We are going to talk to him about his position with the Pro Series and his heavily involvement in NHRA Pro level drag racing. Most of you recognize his car out there with Jay Coughlin doing the driving chores and doing very well. Scott, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Doing really well. How about yourself?
Oh, not bad. We're surviving, trying to get through all this and have this fun production to keep us busy during the downtime. In terms of Pro and their relationship with NHRA, how's that been going during the downtime in terms of trying to get the pros back to drag racing?
Well, I think it's going really well. Obviously it's a pretty fluid situation still from state to state. And sorry, somebody just fired up a car, of course, in the shop. So that's all. I actually thought about that. I'm like, somebody's for sure going to start a car, but
occupational hazard.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Everybody likes a little rumble in the background out of this group. So, but no, Pro is the professional racers and owners organization. Really a group of about, I think there's maybe 10 of us that NHRA comes to with ideas, as well as the Pro board goes to NHRA with ideas and or suggestions. So we're kind of the eyes and ears and the mouth kind of for all the racers to invoke some change or just really get a good handle on what's going on. And I got to say, I mean, Ned Walliser and Josh Peterson have really put in a lot of time working with the individual states to kind of keep track of that on what we're allowed to do, not allowed to do, and as everybody knows, it's a pretty fluid situation. So there's also ATKIS, which is a group that the top 7 motorsports associations in the United States work together. They've got a lobbyist, and so obviously there's a voice in Washington, D.C. that is kind of on the ground there to kind of keep everybody up to date with some of those changes. But as a whole, it's a group effort. Whether you're a one-car team or a Don Schumacher or a John Force or Connie Coletta, you pretty much have the same voice and just kind of really trying to work toward having a better series and a safer series and good for our sponsors and good for our fans.
Awesome.
So in terms of getting back to racing, are there any you could share with everybody about kind of what's going to happen here come, hopefully a month or so?
Well, there's not really a whole lot I can share, but I can tell you that there will be an announcement made tomorrow by NHRA that will really kind of unfold their plan for what they're looking at as the remaining part of the year. They've also developed a kind of like a roadmap back to racing. So they're working with tracks. Obviously, there's been a lot of rumors on the internet, which is great because that shows that there's interest. But really, all the teams and the sanctioning body really want to get back to the racetrack. And obviously, the way that the business structure works with the NHRA, they need to have fans, they need to have entry fees, and they need to have sponsorship. So, our situation is, revenue-wise, our sport does rely heavily on fan support at venue. So, so that's important, and we want to race in front of fans ultimately, and I think everybody's good with maybe a race or two coming up, and maybe before August, but I think outside of that, really, we really want to be in front of fans, and
right.
tentatively we've talked about Indy. And the beauty of that is, Indianapolis has obviously been very pro fans, and there is a rather large race at Indianapolis Motor Speedway the beginning of July. So, we're all very hopeful that that's going to pave the way for more and more fans to be able to be at the racetrack and enjoy the sport that they love.
Kind of looking a little past the Corona situation and all of that, looking at pro during a regular NHRA season, how do racers go about coming to you guys and getting information that they want to cross to hopefully make changes and convey their message? What would a typical season look like for that?
As far as you're saying, issues that somebody might have?
Right, yeah, how racers get a hold of you and pro.
Well, they, all the professional racers have all the contact information of everybody on the board. And a lot of those conversations typically stem around, number one, safety, track prep, really just manpower issues, state ordinances, really we all learn from each other. So it's really just good conduit for race teams and the racers themselves.
Kind of wrapping up the interview, I know as some racers may not know about this resource and know that it's out there. If they want to find more information on it, is this available on any kind of site or anything that they could look for?
I'm sure that you can search on Google, Professional Racers Association or Professional Racers Organization. But at this time, it's really geared around the Top Fuel, the Funny Car, Pro Stock effort. But there's a test session at the beginning of the year, typically in the Phoenix area, and that's kind of an open pro test. So there's the nice thing is everybody in this racing community really wants to help others. And the only time you don't want to help somebody is for about 4 or 5 seconds when they're in the other lane. So that's kind of the norm, I guess. But like I said, it can be stuff as simple as, a first-time team, wanting to know how to get a truck wrapped or how to get a car wrapped or how to do any of that.
Right.
Where to get cylinder heads, and so it's pretty cool.
We look forward to when NHRA kicks back into action here, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Sounds great.
This week on Burnout, we are joined by the man himself, the man, the myth, the legend, two-time PDRA Pro Nitrous World Champion, and the owner of Virginia Motorsports Park, Tommy Franklin. Tommy, how are you, man?
Doing good, man. Just come off a race weekend. Feels good just to be able to get out and get in the car and see all the racers. And shoot, we fought a lot of rain to get there, but we got it off. So
incredible, man. And we were actually just getting ready to ask you about that. What can you give us a little bit of a behind the scenes view on the challenges that you guys at the PDRA, yourself, Tyler Crossnow, your wife, Judy, your entire team have faced in the build up to this first race of the 2020 PDRA No Warning Labels Tour?
Yeah, it's definitely, it's been a challenge everywhere in the country, obviously. And some of the states are just loosening up before the others are. So, we had great partners with Gallatin. We've got, all of our racetracks, but Darlington's coming up next. And, we basically just fought with, the counties and the health departments just to be able to get in. And unfortunately, we weren't able to have spectators, but we were, able to have a limited amount of race entries, which was still a substantial amount, and had a great car count. The unfortunate part was we had to put a cap on it. And I mean, we just had, a long list of people that wanted to get in. So that's the awesome part. That just means that we got a lot of race fans out there that want to go racing. So, the big picture is it's great for the drag racing world, and we can keep this thing going. But, we worked a lot with them. We tried to do everything we could do possible for social distancing and just do everything as touchless as we could. And, we want to do our part to, do everything right and keep everybody safe and do everything on that side. But honestly, we went in there, and short of fighting weather, we really just it went off great. All of our racers were great. Everybody did everything that they could do to protect each other and be aware of, other people's feelings and their surroundings and what they felt on it. So everything went off great. We were able to get in there, and we've got another one next week at Darlington, and we're gonna roll right into that with the same thing, and just try to keep the focus going. Our main goal was just to get this season started. If we just wait until they finally give us the green light without pushing, we just felt like we're going to be into August and September, and before we know it, our season's gone, and it's not easy to have a championship series that way. So we pushed. We were able to get to the end of May, and get an event on, and we got one in the books right now. So at least that part we know.
Did you ever think you'd see the day that you were having to deal with health officials and medical? I mean, it just seems like drag racing, track operators have enough drama in their life, right? I mean, just dealing with racers is a significant challenge, but now you're having to deal with local and state governments. I mean, had that ever crossed your mind that one day we would have to be operating in the political spectrum?
Never in my life. I don't think I could have ever written this script, and a politician I do not want to be. So if I ever had that thought, I know I don't want to be now. So I've dealt, with at the racetrack at Virginia Motorsports Park. We were able to open for our first bracket race this weekend. So we're working on getting that set up. But yeah, I mean, my county government's been on our side the whole time. They love to have us and want us to open up, but we're following the governor's orders, and we've really just been shut down other than we've had 2 weeks of test sessions that we're able to get out and do some testing. But yeah, I mean, literally writing proposals and just basically telling them everything that we would do, to protect everyone, and basically wrote them a script of how that would work. That's what we did with our local governments, and try to get that into the governors, and not a lot of communication. It's frustrating, and I understand they have a lot going on, and the last thing they need to deal with is the racetrack, but it's important on my side. So it was high level.
In terms of writing a script to get back VMP back in action, did you present something and then they say, no, that's not good enough and have to go back and tweak it? Or you guys are pretty much just the hardest part was the communication side, the operations kind of fell into place? Which one was the hardest part?
Yeah, I would say the script kind of went as we did it. I mean, obviously we weren't trying to be greedy. We kind of went in with just some bare minimums, because honestly, we just there's race teams out here that wanted to test. We needed it just to be able to cover overhead. And, we've got people that's been working the whole time. And, so we wanted to keep it going that way. So we gave them a script that what we felt was not greedy, just giving us a limited amount of teams to come in. We didn't open concessions. We spaced the trailers in the parking lot. We limited the amount of team members that could come in, no spectators, things like that. So it literally was not a money-making opportunity as much as just, like I said, to be able to get in and keep our employees going and keep everybody going at what we're doing. So the biggest issue, as you said, was just getting the communication in through the governments and hey, hear me out. Listen to what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to open up and have 50,000 people on site, as much as that's what we wanted to do, but that's not what we were asking for. So once we went into our last executive order, it kind of gave them the ability to treat us as recreation, since we're not having spectators, which means we're not an entertainment business at that point. So that's the hard part, is drag racing is getting put into the entertainment business, which it is in so many ways, shapes, or form. But when you're doing a bracket race or private testing, we're not really at that point. It's really just working on your program. So
just switching gears a little bit from being a track owner to thinking about it from a racer's perspective and being a racer, what does it mean for you to be at the track, like to be back?
Shoot, it was like freedom, I mean, it really, I think we all get it. It just, look, I think just from a human being standpoint, to be able to get into the racetrack and all your friends are there, and just this whole family that we have, we were able to forget about it for a few days. We get in there and it was like, oh, wow. Everybody was cognizant of everybody, but at the same time, it was like, hey, this is normalcy. And we got to sense that from a normal level. And then you quickly, you go in there and with the idea of, I don't care what I do, as long as I get to go down the racetrack, but the competitive nature comes out quick and we're ready to cut somebody's head off really quick. Right. So it was, it happened quick. It definitely got to where, but just, you realize how much, I think all of us kind of let racing or competition get stressful on you, but it was nice to be able to go in and say, I don't really care about any of this. I get to go race and have fun. And that's what it was. It was, you get to go in there and the load was lifted, it was really cool. So from a racer standpoint, it was a blast all weekend, and I came away with the win. So of course I'm gonna say it was a blast.
You make a valid point, man, that like, I think sometimes it's lost on all of us, right? You do so much of this that you get a little jaded, right? It's just another race. We do this all the time. But when it's taken from us, like it has been, it all of a sudden it carries so much more value. And as much as I hate all that's happened, I think that little bit of a refresher, a little checkup from the neck up's probably been pretty good for all of us. Transitioning back to your track ownership role, Tommy, I'm just curious. I'm sure you heard. I mean, it's obviously going to affect the PDRA here in 2020 that Bill Bader Jr. announced yesterday that he's going to go ahead and just close his facility, Summit Motorsports Park, for the remainder of 2020. I'm just curious, can you relate to that situation that he's facing as a national event track owner who also lost their NHRA national event here in 2020?
Yeah, I think you can. Man, I think Bill Bader's probably one of the smartest men in the racing industry. There's no doubt. So, the scary part is you see him make a call like that, and then you think, man, why am I not in line with him? Right. But in all honesty, I feel like we're at the beginning of our tenure in a racetrack. We're in 3 years, and we're still trying to build something and build something that's great and continue to grow and grow within. So, our thought is that we continue to keep our racing going, and my thought is, hey, I got to keep these people working and do everything that we can do. It's so unfortunate to see Bill have to do that because, I think what really his racetrack's so successful, and he has some really large events, and those events are the ones that have, fell through on him, and not by his fault at all. So it's terrible to see it. And I've had a lot of conversation with him. We're on a kind of a summit deal together, in the United States Motorsports Association, just kind of talking to that whole deal. And you hear the problems from all these racetracks. And that's the great thing, is this has brought all of us as racetrack owners together and discussed the industry as a whole, because I think that that's good for all of us just to be able to grow. But yeah, it's terrible to see Bill have to do that. But I think he's a smart man. He knows what he's doing with what he has. And unfortunately, if that's what he has to do to make it make sense at Summit Motorsports Park, that's what he has to do. And it sucks for so many people. It sucks for all the fans that are there. It sucks for the events that he doesn't get to have. And I know it sucks for him. It's crushing him. I've had plenty of conversations with him, and it really does. So, and then from a PDRA level, we were looking forward to going there, first year there. And, I've been pumped on just because it's such a beautiful facility. So, yeah, just I think the only thing that saves us at this point is, shoot, everything's been changing every week or two anyway, so we're just used to it. We just take
it's
it
all you can
right?
do. But you're right. And we talked about it earlier on the show today that, I can't imagine a year of drag racing without a pound of ice cream for $1, and just the incredible show that they've put on in Norwalk, Ohio for the last however many decades. It's a landmark facility for the sport of drag racing. Bill, as you mentioned, is most assuredly one of the smoothest, strongest operators in our entire sport. And I appreciate you reflecting on that situation, because I knew you would have a unique perspective on the whole situation. Mike, I know you had a question kind of related to the same thing as far as COVID-19 is concerned.
Yeah, I just think, where are we headed, for the rest of the year with VMP and PDRA? I mean, you guys have made a lot of adjustments. Do you think it's starting to settle out a little bit? What's the rest of the schedule look like?
Yeah, I mean, our hope is that, obviously we go into Darlington next. As of right now, there's no spectators. We don't think we're going to get spectators before that race, but, and as we come out of that, our next race is Maryland. Now, right now, we're hopeful that we'll have spectators once we get to Maryland. But, like we said, we just don't know. There's still some uncertainty. We had the uncertainty with Norwalk, with Summit Motorsports Park, and Pennsylvania is still shut down, so there's still some uncertainty on Maple Grove. But I want to think I'm kind of a glass half full kind of guy, so I want to think this thing's going to go away quicker, and we'll start opening up and have races like we would in a normal world. If not, I'm going to hope that our other track partners, we've talked to all of them. We've tried to work out just like we did with Galot and Darlington, where basically all we're doing is just trying to get out here and have events. Obviously, it's not easy to go out here and hit home runs when you don't have spectators coming. And so, you know, our goal is to get people out of the house, get them to the racetrack. Let's get back to some sort of normalcy, because if we don't, you know, this industry can't afford people to lose racers and just check out and say, forget it, and I'm moving on. So, you know, we just don't want to see that. It's a great family that we love, and we're just trying to keep it going and do our part to push forward and do that without hurting anyone or hurting somebody's feelings towards this whole thing. So I want to think that by the time we get halfway through the season, we start getting back to some normalcy. That's our hope. I guess.
Well, it's an incredible service. I mean, what you said is so true. It's profound. I mean, this industry needs racers racing. Like, we need racers doing burnouts and purging nitrous systems, and I hate to say it, tearing stuff up. And, you know, that is what drives this drag racing economy, and we need it so badly. So I speak on behalf of myself. I think the entire drag racing community. But thank you, Tommy. I mean, for you guys doing that, because we need events happening so bad. And speaking of events happening, even in the face of crazy weather, right? The forecast scared me off. I'll admit it. You know, I mean, it looked like the end of the world was about to happen out there on the East Coast. You guys stuck it out, had a drag race, and had incredible fields of Pro Nitrous and Pro Boost. I mean, you got to feel, as a competitor, it's one thing, but you got to feel a little bit like a proud papa, right? I mean, that was an incredible collection of cars. Like you said, you were turning people away.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I'll be truthful and say I was a nervous somebody, because I was just like, we're going to push through. We're going to make this happen. And I was just waiting on the skies to part and let this happen. But look, it didn't look good. It didn't look good when we left the shop to head to Galat. But we felt like we had to push through, and I just didn't want to throw the towel in that quick. And then beyond all that, you just got to put it all on the staff that were there, because oh my gosh, man, they dried that racetrack more times than I could ever imagine. And I mean, it literally would get dry and rain, and get dry and rain. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And then I guess it was Saturday night. We were trying to get one session of all the pros in, and had an oil down, had to stop, clean that up. It was a big oil down. So by the time we get it cleaned up, literally was getting ready to go out and spray the track to get ready. And a rainstorm come through that wasn't even supposed to be there. I'm like, where in the world does this stuff come from? So, but they worked their tails off all day long, every day, got everything done, kept the, track dry, even when it was in the middle of the night, just to get it off so that we'd be prepared for the next morning. So, Tyler and his whole gang, everybody there worked like crazy to get it done, and I'm proud of them as a series owner, and just to be able to go there as a racer, everything, they worked their butts off to get it done. That's all on them. We can't do nothing for it other than just thanking them for pushing through, because I know everyone wanted to say, forget it, let's go home.
No, it's incredible, man. I mean, and I think you've got an awesome thing, and it was fantastic to see, like, high-level organized pro racing kind of get its start here in 2020. We appreciate your time here today, Tommy. It's been a wild one for you guys, but we're very appreciative, and we are very appreciative of the time here today.
Awesome. I thank you for everything. Thank you, everyone, for watching us, and the props that you give us, and that just makes us push more, and we're going to keep trying to get this season going and try to have something here.
Sounds like a plan, brother. We'll see you at the next one. And that's it for another episode of Burnout, Week 10. Can you believe we made it this far, guys?
It's unbelievable. It seems like yesterday when this whole thing was hatched and the team was starting to be assembled. But 10 weeks, crazy.
Week 10 came fast. Definitely.
It did. It's hard to believe. It's so crazy to think about how much, and I think now it's like you try to remember back to the people we've talked to and the things we've talked about. And I'll tell you that for me, it's been so nice to kind of wrap this first season up with talking about drag racing. There early on, I was really worried, man, how long are we going to do this show with there being no burnouts, right? Like, the show's called Burnout. We've got to be doing them. We need tire smoke out here. And I was genuinely concerned, but thank the good Lord, we're back to drag racing. And I think pro level racing, the NHRA, is set to return hopefully very soon. Maybe things are going to get back to normal. I don't know.
Well, it's all going to play out in the next few weeks.
We'll find out soon. Thank you guys for joining us on Burnout. We'll see you next time.